Do people leave a conversation with you feeling drained or uplifted? I know that's a difficult question to answer, and because mostly you don't have the other person's perspective. But you know what's a lot easier to answer is, do you know those people that leave you feeling drained? The people that as they start coming towards you, your body slumps, like your shoulders drop, and you have to almost force yourself to just like be civil and polite and hello, because you know it's going to suck energy from you, because they're always so negative. They always just bring all of the darkness, the doom, the gloom. And then you get those other people that as they start approaching, you lighten up. Like your face literally shows it as you see them in the distance, because they energize you, they lift you up, they fill your soul and your spirit, and you look forward to spending time in their company. And that's what we want to ask is, well, who am I? Which person am I truly? And how do I genuinely become somebody that can encourage others? That when they leave my presence, they are better for it. Now that sounds great. And I'm not saying that this is easy, because I know that life is difficult. I know that every single one of us face problems and struggles, and we have fears and anxieties that are real. And it's not that we're exaggerating them. And I know that there are times where we do need to be able to express that. But there's a very, very important part to it, is when you can express how you are feeling, and even if it is negative, but you can say, oh, you know what? I know the Lord is going to work in this. Or you can say, I'm facing this, but I'm seeking the Lord in it. And I'm leaning on Him and His strength. Well, then it doesn't drain you as much. So we want to ask the question, how can we deal with life's problems? How can we be in all of these difficult circumstances, but still follow this instruction that Paul gave to the Thessalonians? Because it's not a hint. It's not oh, maybe you should. He's literally saying, this is what you need to do. And in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 11, it says, therefore, comfort each other and edify one another, which is build each other up. That's what he's saying we need to be doing. And we then want to ask, well, how can I be that person? It's not, I don't want to ask, well, who are the people that encourage me? I want to ask, how can I be the person that encourages others? Am I genuinely an encourager? So we often get this wrong, and I think it's because we have the wrong concept of what it means to encourage others. So to encourage others is not about having flowery words or all the right Christian things to say and always having like just the perfect verse for every single situation or circumstance. So that the person who's coming with negativity, you just like, you hit them with the verse and you're like, oh, no, you must take some spiritual encouragement. That's not what I'm talking about. Because to be encouraging in a genuine way is not just positivity and optimism. Because sometimes encouragement is not about making people feel happy in the moment. Sometimes encouragement is just sitting with them in silence. And your presence and your calm helps them. So how can we tell the difference? And how can we know what it's going to need? And maybe it's important to see that encouragement includes the word courage. And courage is needed not in happy situations, not when things are going well. Courage is needed when we're facing difficulties and darkness. And then it's to find strength and to know where we can get the hope and the plan and the way forward. So when we look at it like that, then we can ask, so how can I encourage people, not just by saying, oh, this is great, you've got this, rah, 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 when they're really struggling. No, biblical encouragement speaks the truth in the middle of difficulty. And it says, God's got this. What is He going to do with this? What can He show us through this? And how is He going to change us in this? So this is not the first time in human history that we're facing difficulties. This is not the worst situation that the world has ever faced. Just a brief glance at the biblical history, a brief glance at world history will show you that there have been some incredibly difficult times. So how can we get through that and say, well, maybe this is a chapter, maybe this is a season that is difficult, but I know that God promises that the outcome's going to be good. Because sometimes encouragement is just sitting next to someone, walking with them and saying, it's going to be okay. Not because the situation's okay, but because God is with you in it. It's the courage to get through the difficult season. It's the courage maybe to confront issues that need addressing. It's the courage to endure what seems impossible. And when you can focus on bringing that courage to people, well, that's when they feel genuinely and in a godly way encouraged. Where we can focus on giving that instead of just receiving it, because everyone wants to be encouraged. But how many of us are willing to say, I want to be an encourager. I want to give encouragement and make sure that that is me following the instruction that God has given. Because it doesn't just say be encouraged. God says encourage one another. And that encouragement has to be genuine. So we have to move away from the positivity and the floweriness and when you feel like, oh, that person didn't really even listen to what I was saying. Like, I'm really struggling. And I shared with them, and all they told me was they gave me a Bible verse. All they said is, don't worry, it'll work out. Don't worry, you've got this. It's going to be fine. Like, no, I want to really know that they're with me and that they understand. And you know how we do that? We have to make sure that we get to the right source of encouragement. Because when you can get to the right source, when you know where you're drawing from, well, that makes a huge difference. So I want to take this verse from 1 Samuel chapter 30, and I encourage you to read that chapter in Samuel. You can even go one or a chapter before, chapter after. But 1 Samuel chapter 30, verse 6, the end of that verse, it says, but David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. He strengthened himself in the Lord his God. And when you understand the backstory, this is one of those epic stories in the scriptures. This is David with his group of 300 valiant, like battle-hardened soldiers who were running away from King Saul at the time. So David wasn't the king. And King Saul was chasing him, wanting to kill him. So David and these men had fled from him, and they'd found refuge in another city called Ziklag. And in that city, their families, their children, everyone was there. But at this point, David and those men had gone off on a military assignment. So they had left all their children behind and their wives. And their other enemies, they called the Amalekites, came. And they burnt the city to the ground. And they took all of the women and the children captive. And David and his fellow soldiers saw this. They saw the flames and they were like, what's going on here? They race back. They get to the city and they just see the destruction and everyone is gone. And the scriptures say, and this, I love this. It says these battle-hardened soldiers and warriors wept until they had no more strength to weep. That is how distraught they were. If ever there was a time that they needed encouragement, you think like, yeah, but how are you going to encourage them in that moment? Their sorrow, then their despair, quickly turned into anger. And they wanted to kill David because he was the one who said, come, let's go on the mission and leave our wives and children behind. So they wanted to stone him to death. And what does David do? And that's where we pick up verse 6. What does David do in that moment? He strengthened himself in the Lord his God. He knew where the source of his strength was. In a moment of absolute despair, where he was so discouraged, where everybody had turned against him and he had lost his wife and his children, and he goes to the Lord. And he falls at the Lord's feet and he says, Lord, please help me. How am I going to get through this? What do you want me to do? Because I find my strength in you. And God says, go chase after the Amalekites. You'll get everybody back. So instead of David going to the men who wanted to kill him and coming up with all sorts of excuses and pleading his case and trying to sort of win them over and say, please don't kill me, he says, guys, no, there's no time for this. Come, we're going. You want to talk about courage? He gets his courage from the Lord and then encourages them to say, let's go. They chase after the Amalekites, and every single woman and every single child is saved alive. Now you can look and you can say, okay, so at what point was there encouragement? There was encouragement from the moment that David turned to the Lord as his source of strength, but it didn't feel like it. It wasn't happy. It wasn't positive. It was like, okay, it was resolve. It was, we've got something to do here, and this is serious. It was only afterwards, at the end of the whole process, that there was joy. So what we draw from that is how we can find our strength in God. That we don't turn to ourselves, we don't turn to our circumstances, we don't turn to the people around us when we are looking for our source of courage to be encouraged. We turn to the Lord and we say, Lord, you are my strength. You are my source of courage, because you are the one that says it's going to be okay. You are going to work this out. And when we can focus on Him, well, that's when we can find that encouragement is not just receiving comfort. Encouragement is finding strength in God in the middle of my difficulties, so that I can continue, I can endure, I can persevere through it. It's not because of ignoring my hardships. It's about finding God's power. And when I know that that is my source, when I know that I've gone to God as my source of strength and of courage and encouragement, then it becomes my resource to give to others. So I can then say, okay, I can now encourage others because I know what it's like to seek the Lord in my times of difficulty. And when my bucket is filled, when my soul is full of God's strength, knowing what He's able to do, well, then it's easy for me to direct others towards the same source. So it's not telling them, don't worry, your circumstances are going to change and everything's going to be fine. No, it's saying, I know where you can find the courage to get through what you're going through. And that becomes the greatest encouragement that you could ever give or receive. It's when your encouragement is genuine and it is felt, because it is an act of faith. It's not just a reaction to our circumstances. It's not saying when everything is fine, then you're going to feel okay. It's like, no, you can feel okay even when everything around you is not okay, because you know that God's got this. He has a plan and He's working through this. Because there is a core focus to encouragement. The real purpose of encouragement is that it is relational. It's got to do with the most important aspect of life, which is not our circumstances. It's not our victories, our successes, or whatever we can accomplish. The real core of life is about the people that God has placed around us. And it's about the relationships that we have with Him and with them. So encouragement follows the same path as all of the other biblical traits. So it is, I receive from the Lord, He's my source, and then that becomes my resource to give to others, which is exactly what we are told about love. Why must we love others? Because God first loved us. It's exactly what we're told about forgiveness. Why must I forgive others? Because they are deserving of it? No, you must forgive others because God has forgiven you and you don't deserve it. Okay, well then it becomes a lot easier for me to give that. Why must I accept others? Exactly the same. Why must I correct others? Well, when I receive correction from God and I open myself up to His correction and I do that work so that I can see the change in my character, well then if I see things in the loved ones around me that needs correction, do you know how different that approach is? There is so much more grace. There is so much more empathy and understanding. It doesn't come across as judgmental. It comes across as, I know how difficult this is, and I'm working on my own stuff. But by God's grace, and because of what He has done in me, I want to help. And that's the approach that we want with encouragement as well. It's that I know what my source is of courage. And when the emphasis is strengthening our relationships, then we can see that I can encourage others on a path that I could never ever have imagined. So, and who are you going to want to encourage? And that's probably the most surprising part. You're going to look at people in your life and you'll be like, I can think of some people who need encouragement. Do you know who needs encouragement? Absolutely everybody. The people that you think are strong, the people that you think, don't worry, they've got it. The people that you think, they are always the ones encouraging other people. I don't need to encourage them. Those are the ones that I want you to think about. I know that sharing on this platform, it's an incredible way to reach people. And you won't believe how much encouragement both Jess and I need constantly. We need to go find it in the Lord, but how beautiful it is as well to receive it from those who are finding encouragement in the Lord. So recently, at a time where we needed some encouragement, we received a picture from a teacher in Canada. One of her students had listened to a message on how to pray, and it was part of their curriculum that she uses. And he had to choose someone in his life who was influential. And he drew a picture of me, and it's the cutest picture. He drew this picture, and he said, even though I don't know Warren for very long, he's influential because he's helped me to understand how to pray. That it's not just when I'm struggling or when I need something, but it can be part of my everyday life. And that is receiving encouragement like that, which is not, Warren speaks well. What does that do? No, it's Warren helped me go to the source of courage and strength. And that's how I've been encouraged. Like all the feedback, the comments, the things that we get told, where it leads you closer in your walk with the Lord, the encouragement that brings. And I want to tell you, look for those opportunities, not just with us. Look for those opportunities specifically with the people who are closest to you, with those around you, so that when they see you coming, they have that face of, wow, I'm glad. I'm looking forward to being in their presence. So it's not just that no one is exempt from needing encouragement, it's also that we never outgrow the need. And that's why Paul gives the instruction. He says it to the Thessalonians. He says, I know that you are encouraging one another. Do it more, because you're going to need it constantly. Why? Because life is difficult. Because we are facing things that are going to draw us away from one another and from our source of courage. So let's keep going back to that and keep going and saying, I want to encourage people in the most genuine way, in the most powerful way. And that is to encourage each other in the Lord. So I want to ask you, are you an encourager? And how are you going to get there? Because if you want to be an encourager, the first thing that you have to do is you have to go and find your source of strength. So if you want to be an encourager, step one, let's go find our strength in the Lord. Let's make sure that we are going to Him and dealing with the stuff that we need to deal with and facing up to the things that we have to face up to and getting courage to do that. Because then our bucket's going to be filled. Our soul is going to be overflowing with being able to encourage those around us. Because encouragement is a choice and it's an instruction. It's something that we have to take seriously. So go, find your strength in the Lord, and then give encouragement to those around you. And let's encourage one another.